All right, now I'm pleased to welcome Chris and John. Chris and John came down from Cleveland at KeyBank. That's where they spend their time and days, most weeks, I'd suspect. They're going to be talking about DevOps and banking and finance. Please join me in welcoming both Chris and John. And I left them on an island. We actually need to do a mic transition. So I'm going to hand over this microphone, and we're going to get the wireless lavalier. He does have it. Excellent. These guys are on top of things. I have no idea what's going on. I just stand here. Quick note, too, we have a poll on Twitter for the DevopsDays Ohio Twitter. Check that out. We welcome your votes. All right, please join me in welcoming Chris and John. Show of hands. Thanks.
So, can you guys hear me okay? That good? Good? Okay. Don't go past this line, right? Okay. So my name's John. I'm the director of DevOps at KeyBank.
And I'm Chris McFee. I'm an architect on John's DevOps team.
So I love events like this because this is where you find people taking notes in visual code. You don't find that very often. Anybody else get that joke? All right. So real quick about KeyBank. Has everybody heard of KeyBank? I hope so, because we're in Ohio, and that's where our headquarters are. So we're in Cleveland, home of the NBA final champions, Cleveland Cavaliers, and soon to be World Series champions, Cleveland Indians, right? That's right. So, that's right. Wait, did he say go Cubs?
He did.
Oh, man. So, I didn't hear it up here. So, you know, everybody thinks of us as a Midwestern bank. Couple different neat factoids. We actually have a big presence in the upper Northwest. A lot of branches in Colorado, Washington, Oregon area. And another, you know, one of our other big differentiators is our corporate bank. We're very versatile. We have a very good investment banking group, very powerful in the industry. We're actually looked at as one of the leaders in the capital market space. And we actually also own a group called the Pacific Crest Research. And they actually get to write research on technology trends and small startups and small companies that investors are looking to do something with. And that actually lets us, you know, kind of jump right into some of that data. And that really helped jumpstart some of our DevOps conversations that we started. It hooked us up with guys like John Willis from Docker, among many others. So we had to admit that we had a problem first. And this started probably a couple years ago. We had a significant outage. And that outage led to a very long downtime. And when that happened, obviously the first thing that the executives are going to do are going to be like, you know, what happened? You have to explain in detail to the executives exactly what happened. And some of us were like, well, we really don't know because we don't understand our own complexity. And that just kind of grew throughout time of acquisition, right? We're a legacy bank. We're primarily, we're brick and mortar, kind of grew up that way. And when you grow through acquisition, large enterprises tend to take on a lot of technical debt. So when this happened, and really people couldn't figure out, well, why were we down and how did it happen? And when we tried to fix things, we actually made things worse. You know, we needed to get a better handle on our complexity. And doing so, we also evaluated and said, we also have to kind of reimagine how we're delivering today to make ourselves a lot more, you know, standards and using best practices. So that was really how we kicked off. So the next slide, the executives kind of came to us and said, hey, we want to take some people out of your day job and create a group. We called it START, which stood for Senior Technical Action Review Team. And just go in there and find out when someone logs in, where do they go? How many network hops do they take? Where do they end up landing? How come we can't understand that complexity? And to be honest with you, it's not as easy as it sounds. Plenty of vendors in the space will probably tell you, oh, we have a tool for that. We have a tool that'll tell you exactly what happens behind the scenes. But a lot gets lost in translation, especially when you're going through proprietary hardware. So what we did was we created this group and we said our goals are really to document the technical landscape, you know, review these processes. Like when an issue does happen, how come we don't know the right way to work around the issue sometimes, right? We should have resiliency. Each one of our components is highly available. We should always be up. So why were we down and how did that exactly happen? And Chris is going to take us through exactly how that happened.
So show of hands, how many people have a document that has your entire application workflow from start to finish? You're lucky. Obviously, we didn't. So one of the first things that we had to do was document what components are available, how the application flowed through each other application, each other piece of the infrastructure. In order to do that, we took some of our old architecture documents. They maybe hadn't been updated in some time. Maybe they were out of date. We also sat down and we did a lot of interviews with each of our channel application teams. We then sat down with security, with our infrastructure teams to really understand once the transaction gets into your infrastructure, what are the back channels, maybe something to an Active Directory, maybe something to an LDAP. How does that communication flow specifically for this application? The next thing we did is we reviewed the playbook for each point of failure. So in a large enterprise application, there are a multitude of platforms that are there in order to help the application. So how do you understand the networking if the networking fails? How do you understand the app server if the app server fails? What happens to the application at that point? So after we did the round of interviews, after we looked at some of the application and infrastructure teams' playbooks, we really started to construct some hypotheses around, well, how can we make our bank more resilient in our channel applications? So we came up with a number of hypotheses, a number of things that we thought could make a difference for our external customers. And then we really reviewed the results with all of the stakeholders. So application teams, infrastructure teams, security, the whole gamut. And what were our outcomes? Well, this is a sample diagram that we completed for our online banking, one of our online banking applications. There was a significant amount of complexity. So in order for one login to happen, there were 190 different hops between infrastructure pieces. We also had 2 data centers. The way that our networking was configured, it was possible that you would come into one data center and 50% of the time go to the other data center. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that can make your customer experience not great. So what were some of the other findings that we saw? We really lacked standard configurations. There was a lack of automation across all of the infrastructure components, and we really had a siloed approach to responsibilities if certain components failed. We also had the exponential growth of the environments over time created a large amount of technical debt. So we came up with some recommendations, modernizing our events and alerting platform, sit down with our enterprise operations center to help them to understand here's what to look for in the event of an issue. Look at our networking zones and making sure that those made sense for the way that we were currently constructing our applications. And then develop reference architecture so that there was a repeatable pattern and everybody was kind of doing the same thing across all the infrastructures. Finally, we said, hey, maybe we need to reimagine the way that we do our delivery of our applications. And that's really what started our DevOps journey.
And so, this picture here, in my opinion, this is what you end up with when you have a very siloed IT organization, right? Because everybody's saying, well, I care about my own little space area here, and I'm building resiliency for my little space, but no one was really looking at it from an end-to-end solution perspective. And that's how we kind of grown into this complexity. So what was next, right? We had this great output, and we had some of these recommendations we were going to go jump to right away. Some of them, like DevOps, took some convincing to our executive leadership team. So we really had to work on our elevator pitch. And I felt like Luke from, riding up with Darth Vader, like, I still see good in you, you should, no one? Okay. So we had to create an elevator pitch for our executive team. And once again, like you read all the books, Gene Kim, Jez Humble, they'll all tell you need a metrics-driven approach when you go into this. So that was the thing we delivered. So we basically said, hey, we're really going to improve our mean time to resolution. We're going to improve our release frequency, and we're going to make things more standard, more testable. We're also going to cut budget, so that evil triangle that everyone always talks about that says, hey, time, quality, and budget are the 3 things that always get distorted based on what you're trying to do. I think DevOps kind of starts to eliminate all 3 of those at once, right? Because I can move faster, I can do things cheaper, and I can have higher quality if I'm just doing it in a much smarter way. And so that was really the message that we put inside our elevator pitch. And I love how everybody does have the walls of confusion. We threw test in there because we have a separate test organization as well, and there's walls of confusion that happens between them as well. And we also used industry metrics to kind of start because here's the thing, you're going to say, well, I don't even know where to go with these metrics. Start with what the industry's already laid out there, right? There's no reason you can't start with that and then start working backwards to say what is achievable for your organization. So our executive team bought in and said, all right, you know what? We'll give it a shot. And the cool part about it was, what we did within KeyBank was we basically said, we're going to angel fund this project. We're basically going to create a startup within our large financial services organization. Our chief architect was basically one of our investors, and our chief technology officer was one of our investors. They were kind of at the forefront saying, hey, I'll invest some money, I'll invest some people, you guys go off and show me what you can do. So the next piece was then really identifying our change agents, and we had some really good ones, but it wasn't a big team. I don't think you need to start with a very large team, especially just to start making that difference. I mean, our initial team was 4 people, and we had some change agents on the delivery and testing side that really helped us out. But really, the initial team was really just 4 people. Our focus areas were in 3 specific places. We focused on containers, which for us, that's infrastructure automation, right? It did take us a while for us to get servers stood up and get them out the door. The second one was automated testing. Obviously, we couldn't move fast, and if we couldn't test immediately fast, we couldn't wait to spin up 30 manual testers in order to do regression testing every time we were trying to make changes. And then the last piece is continuous delivery. So that's really us, the glue that kind of holds the whole thing together. It plugs all these inputs in and allows us to automate and move fast. Now, at the same time that this was happening, that we kind of pitched, KeyBank had just announced that we were going to acquire First Niagara. And First Niagara was a bank headquartered up in Buffalo. They were about half the size of KeyBank, so it was a very large acquisition for us. Now, at that same time, we were also starting and building out new digital applications for online banking and our treasury portal. So it was almost like the stars were aligning. It was like the perfect storm coming together. And they really needed to move fast. Those applications needed to get done before our First Niagara integration, so that we could actually give the best user experience for these new customers that were going to be onboarded from First Niagara.
So one of the things that we when we first spun up was, well, what tools do we need? And obviously DevOps isn't tools, but they enable some other capabilities that you're able to do. This is a living document. We continue to change it weekly. And quite frankly, we always think it's fun that people take pictures of our slides, so we wanted to put a person taking a picture of a slide. This just goes to show that there's not one tool for everything, and many of the vendors say, well, we'll sell you one unit of DevOps, and I'm sure Ducey is around here somewhere willing to sell you that as well. But this was our first, second, and third take on this, and like I said, it continues to evolve as we're growing.
So the other cool part I like about events like this is I swear people come and make up words all the time. And so the latest buzzword people keep telling me about, I don't know if you guys have heard this, is Mobilegeddon and Generation Z. Anybody heard that? That's like a new buzzword going around now anyways. So, so that we have all of our big consultants coming up and telling us, well, you need to worry about Mobilegeddon. It's coming. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to steal that, and I'm going to create my own word called, hey, I think it's time for Containergeddon and Generation C, right? So it sounds kind of funny. So like I said, we definitely were not super agile when it came to doing infrastructure delivery. And so, and I'm going to tell you why. And from an infrastructure perspective, what we typically start with is trying to build a product. And that product, from an infrastructure perspective, we need physical hardware to obviously have it run on. We at KeyBank, we virtualize that to get the most bang for our buck. Then we install operating systems on it. Then we install frameworks that are required, and we install typically more frameworks. Then we install platforms that give us service levels and some type of support. And then we're finally done. We can install our applications, and we're ready to go, right? Now we have to go through and we have to configure all those from a security perspective. They're all going to have to be tuned, and we're going to have to operationalize those so that they'll work within our EOC. We're getting all the events and alerts at all of those different layers, right? Now we're done. Now you have to test and validate, and you have to do individual testing, dependency testing, making sure all these things, all the right ports are open, all the right communications can be adhered to. So now you're done. Now you have to just go do all of that over again, and now you have to patch and upgrade and hotfix. Now each of these lines and boxes are typically different teams for us, which is why it typically takes us about 2 months to get an application installed and up and running on a server. Now, that's a large enterprise. What I heard before, and some people probably don't have to deal with this, but at a large enterprise where you have a lot of process, this is what we have to go through day in and day out. And it's very hard to try to get all of these teams to communicate just to get something installed on one server. And I also have to do that 4 times, right? Because I have to do that for my dev, IT, QV, production, preview environments, et cetera. So our thought process here was to basically try to eliminate as much of this as we possibly can or automate it. And that's kind of where Docker came in, right? So if I can configure and build everything in a container and isolate it, now I can just move that container around whatever infrastructure I want. And John Willis always uses the term immutable infrastructure, which I love. Now, I'll tell you, I don't think many business people like it because it doesn't make a ton of, it's not 100% accurate, but I do like the term. And this is what really allows us to move fast now, right? Because I don't have to set up all of those meetings and cross-coordinate against all those operational teams. Because once I've built this Docker image in dev, it's now just being passed around. And it's just eliminating a lot of responsibility on the infrastructure operations side. And Docker's great, but it doesn't give us everything we need from being highly available. It doesn't guarantee that I'll always have a Docker container available to itself. They did build that with Swarm, but inherently, if you're just using the containers and building the image, you don't get that. So we needed our battleship for Container-geddon is what I called it. And that's kind of where Kubernetes came in. And here's this lethargic definition. Kubernetes is an open source orchestration system for Docker containers. It handles scheduling on the nodes in a compute cluster and blah, 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 right? It's this great thing. And I could see Ron Burgundy saying, what did you say, my hair? Right. What is it really? It's really Google, right? It's their Borg cluster management solution. And I mean, if anybody's using Google, you never really get downtime when you're using Google, right? You never run your search and it say, hey, we're in the middle of a delivery right now. We'll get back to your search in a minute as soon as our deployment's done. Or we're in the middle of an upgrade. They don't do that. And that's because they built this great Borg cluster management solution. And then they open sourced it and called it Kubernetes. And that is really what helps drive a lot of our reliability. So it gives us things like rolling deployments and auto-scaling and microservice security from tunneling between different containers. And I'll tell you, the benefit of Kubernetes has been huge for us as a bank. We're putting gold tier applications on it. And a lot of people, I think, try to sell Kubernetes or platforms as a service as being the innovation platforms. We didn't go to it for that reason at all. We went to it for reliability reasons. We went to it for high availability. We went to do it so that we could deploy in the middle of the day during our highest peak of transactions and not affect any users at all. Those were the real reasons we were looking for something like Kubernetes.
So in order to have this high velocity of application delivery, we needed to make sure that we had high quality as well. So in order to do that, we needed to make sure that we were automating testing. So right now, so initially what we wanted to do is we wanted to have a gated commit process where it wouldn't even commit into source control unless it passed all the tests. Now that wasn't really, we weren't able to accomplish that. So we went to the next best thing, which was essentially a gated deploy process. So when a developer checks code in, the next thing we do is we have it polling to ensure, to see if there's any new code. Once it detects that there's new code, it immediately starts to build and test. So we start kicking off unit tests. We start kicking off API testing to ensure that we're getting data in and out that we expect. And then we start to kick off end-to-end automated regression tests. And that really checks the integrations between a lot of the different applications. Now, as a part of this, you do have to make certain that your training of these new capabilities isn't an afterthought. So we did stumble a little bit when we were trying to spin up this automated testing because it was new to us. So if you're going down this path, make sure that it's not an afterthought for you.
And so continuous delivery is kind of what pulled all this together. And you can see here, what I like about this picture is on the top, you see we have application development, we have business analysts, we have test development, infrastructure development. Everybody's contributing to source control now. And that, to me, is just awesome, right? I don't know about you, but we were living in a world where everybody had their own template. right? There's an Excel template for business test scripts. There's a Word template for feature development, and there's all of these different templates out there. Now we're trying to say, hey, let's make what you have as usable as possible, and check that into version control. And just having it in version control automatically gets us a place where we can actually start scoring statistics, building dashboards on, finding out where we are at any time in the process. And the last piece about continuous feedback, excuse me, is really being able to say, how are you tracking for your build process? Where are you from a feature completion perspective? We're able to, contribute those dashboards, send those right back to the development, project, and test management teams, and have it be accurate. Not have somebody put together a dashboard and say this is the world as we know it, when it was done manually and we can't really go back to say how did you come up to those numbers. Now we can, and that really helps us out a lot. So how do we progress to our goals? And this is an exciting slide for us. I'm really excited to talk about it. The first piece on the left here, talking about test automation, we're doing way more. We did legacy test automation, but it was hard for us even to call it test automation because it still required us to go through rounds of manual testing. When we were doing it, we're doing way more scenarios than we were, and we're doing it so much shorter and faster. Basically, we would have to kick off our automated tests, let them run for a few days, and then come back to it and say, well, did it fail? Did it succeed? Typically, it found 0 defects most of the time. It really wasn't usable. Now that we can run over 200 scenarios in any given build, which we execute every 5 minutes because we have it running and scaling across our Kubernetes platform, which is pretty cool. It gives us the ability to run 5,000 tests per build. It gives us the ability to identify 10 defects a day in the middle of our development. And because we're finding them so fast, 60% of the time they were fixed within the next day. And lots of times what we actually had a hard time doing was capturing that information so that we could report back on it, because lots of times people aren't entering the defects. Because if you basically are getting it back instantaneously, you're not actually able to say, or I can fix it faster than I can actually put the defect in. So to us, that was a metric that we still had to uncover. So now we got to the first Niagara. We got to the actual delivery of our new online banking application. And when the first Niagara customers first started onboarding, what we called our customer day one experience, it was quite a day. We built this online experience for the first Niagara customers to enroll into their new online banking accounts for KeyBank. And we built it in such a way that we tried to make it as seamless and as the best user experience as possible, but we didn't get it quite right. Now, the new processes we had in place and the new infrastructure that we put in place and the new deployment processes we put in place allowed us to basically do 10 releases within the first 4 days. We did those 10 releases during our busiest spike KeyBank's ever had in online banking. And to me, I'm just so proud to make that statement. I think it's just awesome. And at the same time, we had 0 defects. We had 0 people have any issues with the online banking experience while we were making these changes and making it more usable for the first Niagara employees to enroll into online banking for KeyBank. And the last piece here is open source. So the gentleman before us kind of talked about the importance of open source and how to contribute. I totally agree. This is giving us kind of an edge as a large enterprise, right? Because one, we basically get to bring these platforms in, and now it basically gives us hundreds of developers that we can, that are building on top of our platforms, and it's giving us a cost advantage against large enterprise service agreements that we would have to sign. So we're really, really happy to embrace that. And it wasn't easy, by the way. The comment about meeting with the lawyers, too many times with the lawyers, by the way.
So as John mentioned, we began to employ and are trying to contribute to open source. So some of the things that we're doing is we're using visualizations in things like Grafana in order to see system metrics. We're using data that's coming out of our Kubernetes cluster, feeding it into Grafana so that we can see how the cluster is doing. We also began to implement Netflix's circuit breaker pattern in Hystrix. So if you're not familiar, what it allows you to do is it allows you to see your services to back-end components. And if the services are having issues, if there's something going on in the back end, it will open up the circuit so that it stops sending traffic back there until things are ready to handle the load again, and it begins to slowly trickle things back through. The other thing that we implemented was Capital One's Hygeia dashboard, which is a really great conversation piece as you're trying to deliver software. It allows you to have data-driven conversations with project managers, delivery teams, infrastructure teams, so you can see what their build velocity is. You can see how many times they're committing into source control. You can see where in each environment the code is. And it really allows you to have some conversations as to maybe why things are slowing down or where that bottleneck is. The other thing that we started to do is, and we're trying to get this contributed back, is we are currently developing a Kubernetes and OpenShift plugin that will allow you to track the code from each environment. So we're really excited about that. So what were some of our lessons learned, or what were some of our biggest speed bumps? Well, policy and process adherence. So we're a financial institution. We have to report back to regulators. We have our own internal risk and audit teams. We have our security teams. So it's really providing them with the information that they need in order to make an assessment, and being completely transparent with them so that they can make the right decision based on our risk postures. The other thing was legacy skill sets and the traditional offshore model. So in the traditional offshore model, you do your development, you do your builds, get it out the door ready for your manual testing. And then once it comes time for manual testing, the offshore team would take it over, do their testing, and in the morning you'd come back to some defects. Well, we really partnered with some great people in our quality assurance teams, and they were able to kind of evolve with us so that now during offshore time, they are taking some of the development activities in our test automation and giving us more tests that we can run on each of our builds, which is a great thing for us. The other thing is change management for our existing teams. So I don't know about anybody else, but change is really hard for me. I'm not comfortable in change. So as you're driving these type of process changes or trying to change the way that people are thinking about delivering software, it's a big shock. So we still have support teams that are inundated with a backlog of keeping the lights on or traditional delivering of our projects. So we're still trying to overcome some of that, as well as we still have some management that rightfully so are protecting their resources so that they can get their work done. So we're still trying to work through that. One of the things that we're trying to do as we scale this practice or scale what we're trying to do is injecting people into our delivery teams that can teach the people essentially how to fish. So teach you how to write automated use cases, teach you how to understand the delivery pipelines, teach you all about our infrastructure. And I think Target has done a great job with their dojo, and that's something that we'd really like to replicate.
And this is our last slide. So just to close, we hit a lot of bumps, right? You hit a lot of people saying, this isn't going to work. We're a bank, we're a regulated industry. You can't move fast. You can't do this. You can't bypass some of these things. And there's no secret sauce to fixing that. It's rolling up your sleeves and just doing the work and figuring it out. There's a solution to all of those problems. And I think we had a really good balance between people really just focused on getting things done, people focused on cutting through some of the red tape and figuring out a better way to automate the process. And we had the top-down support. We had the leadership support from our CIO all the way down, and that's a must-have. We would have failed miserably if that wasn't the case. But it was also grassroots. So it was done internal to Key, brought up through internal to Key, and I think that was the reason that we have a great success story. I'm really proud of the guys and our delivery teams that were also associated with it. So thanks for listening.
I think we can take maybe one or two questions. We're close to time.
Great talk, thanks. We're a bank, so we feel your pains on the first slide and the first few slides. So one of the questions I have is around when you started, how did the teams change, right? Traditional IT silos moving to, I guess, what does the team structure look like, and how did that journey
No,
look like?
that's a great question, and I'll tell you that we're still evolving. So we haven't reorged within our infrastructure space yet. I think that we've identified areas where we know that we can find some improvements. And this is a very controversial topic, by the way, because many people say, hey, you should go to a plan, build, run model. Some people say, no, you need a bimodal IT, that Gartner tries to pitch. And I'll say, I think it's a secret sauce for every company, and we're still identifying ours. We didn't have to change, but one thing I think that really helped us was we found change agents within all of the silos that worked with us day in and day out, within our Unix team, within the delivery teams, within the testing teams, and we almost kind of incorporated them to make them maybe a federated model into our group, if that makes sense.
One more? Oh, over there.
Something that was kind of oddly missing from your architecture was any mention of public cloud. I know the big four banks, the too big to fail banks, have made a hard pivot toward public cloud just in the last few months. Just curious where's your head at around public cloud in a bank, which is kind of an odd conversation.
So I'm actually going to counter that and say, what benefits do I not get with Kubernetes that I would need to get with public cloud, right? And I'm still running it on, I'm running it on commodity hardware. I don't have to deal with the security problems that public cloud's going to introduce, but I'm still getting all the benefits with Kubernetes from a private cloud perspective. So I guess I'll make that argument. And by the way, I'm not getting paid by Appendra or Red Hat, which run Kubernetes under the hood. But is it a conversation we're having? Yes. Is it in our strategy and it's in our roadmap? Yes. But we haven't taken our first step into public cloud for applications that are not SaaS or ASP based. Because SaaS ASP based, we're obviously embracing those models.
Thank you.
Got it?